For years, anybody who questioned weather modification was labeled crazy or a conspiracy theorist. Now we've learned that they've been doing it for decades. And not only is it a multi-billion-dollar industry, the government has invested a lot of Americans' hard-earned tax dollars into it. They've been forced to spin it, and apparently it is now the only way we are going to save humanity. However, let's look at the risk. According to GAO, injecting a cloud with silver iodide increases precipitation anywhere from 0 to 20%. It could be even more, but the truth is that we really don't know for certain. The questions that are asked is, can you control the exact amount of precipitation that a cloud will produce if it is injected with silver iodide or another cloud seeding agent? Can you control where the precipitation is going to land with 100% certainty? Can you say that it will not cause or enhance flooding with 100% certainty? Is there any way to measure with absolute certainty the effectiveness of seeding a cloud? Do we know with 100% certainty how much rain a cloud would have produced if it had not been seeded? And lastly, did the American people ever get to have a say in any of this? The truth is that there's absolutely no way to measure the effectiveness of cloud seeding. But something else that needs to be known is the American people deserve to know that there is very little rules and regulations over this. These companies that perform cloud seeding and other types of geoengineering projects have to fill out forms from NOAA, and they have to list what agents they're using. And there is a category that simply says other, and they don't have to even fill out what other means. And I think that's extremely concerning.
DOGE is back, and there's going to be a lot to unpack in this hearing. But I think first and foremost, we want to acknowledge that the purpose of this subcommittee and why it was created in the first place by the majority was to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. That's literally the mandate for the DOGE subcommittee. And I want to emphasize that we remain focused on that mission. In fact, we are working on a report on the waste, fraud, and abuse that we're currently seeing in this administration. And I think it's important to also recognize that we are 14 days from a government shutdown. And so I'm troubled to see that this subcommittee, which is designed to address government spending, to streamline efficiency of government programs, has strayed so far from its mission, especially as there's such pressing matters facing our country, including a government shutdown, the passage of the big ugly bill, which not only drove up the federal deficit by $4 trillion, but is kicking millions of Americans off their health care and about to make their health care premiums go up, tariffs that are causing inflation to go up and putting small family businesses out of business, an administration that's flouting the rule of law every day, and a total lack of transparency in the Epstein case as the administration has still refused to comply with the subpoena that this committee issued. So there's a lot of important things that this committee could tackle, and I would think that a topic involving environmental science would be more well-suited to a committee that actually deals with science or environmental issues. But I am happy to talk about climate change and weather modification. It's a topic that I've spent many years of my career working on. In fact, I worked more than 20 years as a water resources manager working on drought and water planning issues in the state of New Mexico, and I know how important addressing drought and water issues is for our farmers and ranchers out there. And personally and professionally, there's a lot to discuss with respect to weather modification. And so if we're going to talk about it, let's talk about it. Certainly, there's a lot of DOGE-related topics we could talk about with respect to climate change and weather programs, including the dismantling of climate, natural resources, and emergency response programs, the firing of federal officials, dismantling of EPA, the illegal freezing of federal funding, removal of the U.S. from international climate agreements, dismantling clean energy programs, catastrophic response to natural disasters, including what we saw in Texas. And all of these topics would be ripe for an oversight hearing. So I hope that we can use this hearing to discuss some of those issues. But with respect specifically to weather modification, whether it's cloud seeding or other technologies, I actually agree with many of the assertions about the need for further discussion, further science, and potentially further regulation of these particular technologies. But it's important that we distinguish between fact and fiction, between clickbait and real solutions. So let's talk about some facts. Weather modification and cloud seeding, as was mentioned, it's a real thing. It exists. It has been practiced in varying forms since the 1940s. Increasingly, folks are looking at this as an opportunity to increase rain and precipitation, but the science is still out on many of these technologies, and we absolutely need to understand what are the implications for air quality, for precipitation, and the implications also for water rights in the West, because this could have far-reaching implications. But it's also important to understand that many of these technologies are in the R&D phase. They're in limited use in a number of states, and it's not actually technologies that the federal government even widely supports. This is largely in the private sector. So in the world of science, it is widely acknowledged that more science is needed to understand use, efficacy, and impacts of these technologies. So those are the facts. Those are the facts. But it's hard to understand why we're discussing banning these practices outright in this committee when the Oversight Committee in another subcommittee, literally as we're sitting here right now, is having a hearing about dismantling the Environmental Protection Agency. And the actual bill under discussion in this committee is trying to use the EPA to regulate these particular practices. So the inconsistency in governance is very confusing here. But there's a more insidious issue here, which I think we've already heard in some of the comments, which is the using of the platform of Congress to proffer anti-science theories, to platform climate denialism, and to ultimately put our communities at risk by continuing to put out disinformation.
Scientific American reports that scientists recently concluded that the past 2 decades represent the driest span in the western U.S. since at least the late 1500s, and that this mega drought has been heavily influenced by climate change. But Marjorie Taylor Greene would never say that. As climate change increasingly impacts human, ecological, and agricultural health, climate deniers like Marjorie Taylor Greene continue to call climate change a hoax. Scientists will be forced to find new and innovative ways to mitigate the damage caused. Denial doesn't change reality, and the longer leaders ignore the science, the harder and more expensive any solutions will become. If you enjoyed that, then make sure that you never miss another video by subscribing. And if you want a little more, consider hitting the join button and becoming a member. So you're probably wondering, why would I do that? Well, when you do that, you get access to bonus content that I make every single week, and it's a lot of fun. You get custom emojis and more. If you join at tier 3, by the way, you even get access to a monthly member hangout with myself. And you'll get all that going forward, but you'll also unlock years of the back catalog that is literally 100 or more bonus clips and top 10 lists and debates and more. So what are you waiting for?